She was ignored and mocked by all, but CEO kissed her at a party and proposed. Everyone was stunned. Margaret Fried stood in the corner of the company gala, invisible as always, watching her co-workers laugh and network while she clutched a glass of cheap champagne. Then Louis Gray, the CEO, the man worth $3 billion, the most powerful person in the room, walked straight past everyone who mattered and kissed her. In front of everyone. And before she could process what was happening, he got down on one knee. "Marry me," he said, loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear. The room went silent. Jaws dropped. Her bully boss nearly choked on her drink. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. This story is going to blow your mind, so stay until the very end, you won't regret it. And to my amazing returning viewers, thank you for being here. You're the reason I keep bringing these stories to life. Now let's dive in. Margaret Fried was 35 years old, and she'd perfected the art of being invisible. Not physically, though her co-workers seemed to look right through her in the hallways of Grey Tech Industries. Not professionally, though her boss Veronica Hartwell took credit for every project Margaret completed. Just invisible in the way that mattered. The way that made you feel like you could disappear and nobody would notice for weeks. She sat at her desk on the 14th floor, surrounded by the open-plan office chaos of a tech company that prided itself on innovation and disrupting the status quo. Around her, people networked, laughed, formed alliances. Margaret kept her head down and worked. Margaret. Veronica's voice cut through the office noise like a knife. Conference room. Now. Margaret saved her work, a comprehensive market analysis she'd spent 2 weeks perfecting, and followed her boss into the glass-walled room where 3 other department heads waited. "Tell them what you told me," Veronica said, settling into her chair with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Margaret's stomach dropped. She hadn't told Veronica anything. "I'm sorry, I'm not sure. About the new client acquisition strategy. The one you've been working on. The one Veronica had explicitly told her to keep quiet about. The one Veronica was clearly about to present as her own." "Oh," Margaret said quietly. I thought that was still in development." "Well, develop it out loud. These people don't have all day." So Margaret did. Explained her research, her strategy, her projected outcomes. Watched Veronica nod along like she'd contributed even one original thought. Watched the department heads take notes and congratulate Veronica on her innovative thinking. "Great work, Veronica," one of them said as they filed out. "This could really put us ahead of the competition." Veronica preened. Margaret gathered her notes in silence. "You can go," Veronica said when they were alone. "And Margaret, maybe try contributing more in meetings. You're so quiet, people forget you're even here." "Because you make sure of it," Margaret thought but didn't say. She just nodded and left. "Quick question for you. Have you ever had someone take credit for your work? Drop a comment and let me know. Margaret's about to get her moment, trust me." Back at her desk, Margaret opened her laptop and lost herself in work. It was easier than thinking about how she'd become this person. The woman who let people walk all over her. The woman who'd stopped fighting back somewhere around the time her mother died and her brother stopped calling and she realized she was completely alone in the world. She was so focused on her screen that she didn't notice the office emptying out. Didn't notice the sun setting through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Didn't notice anything until a voice behind her said, "Don't you have a home to go to?" Margaret spun in her chair and felt her heart stop. Louis Gray stood 3 feet away, hands in the pockets of perfectly tailored pants, looking at her with an expression somewhere between amused and concerned. The CEO. The founder. The man whose face was on the cover of Forbes and Fortune and every business magazine that mattered. The man she'd never spoken to in 2 years of working here. "Mr. Gray," she managed, standing so fast her chair rolled backward. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize, I was just finishing." "It's 8:30, he said, and now he definitely looked concerned. "On a Friday night." "I know. I just wanted to complete this analysis before the weekend. For Veronica Hartwell's team? Margaret blinked. He knew who she was. Who she worked for. Yes, sir. He walked closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne and something else. Coffee, maybe? You're Margaret Fried. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes. You've been here 2 years. Data analysis, market research, strategic planning. You have a master's degree from Columbia. You graduated top of your class. And you're currently working on a client acquisition strategy that's probably the best idea anyone in this company has had all year. Margaret's brain short-circuited. How do you? I read every employee file personally. I know everyone who works for me. He smiled, and it transformed his face from intimidating CEO to something warmer, more human. I also know Veronica Hartwell has been taking credit for your work for approximately 18 months. I don't, that's not. Margaret. He said her name like it mattered. Like she mattered. You can lie to yourself. But don't lie to me. She closed her mouth. Stared at him. This couldn't be happening. I have a proposition for you, Lewis said. Have dinner with me. Tonight. And we'll talk about why you're wasting your talent working for someone who doesn't deserve you. I can't. I mean, I shouldn't. It's not a date. It's business. I'm your CEO, and I want to discuss your future at this company. Unless you're planning to keep letting Veronica steal your work and your credit for the rest of your career. Put like that, she didn't really have a choice. Okay, Margaret heard herself say. Dinner. Business. Good. Lewis pulled out his phone. Give me your number. I'll send you the address. And just like that, invisible Margaret Fried became visible to the one person who could change everything. So tell me, would you have said yes to dinner with the CEO? Or would you have run away? Comment below. The restaurant was in downtown Savannah, tucked into a historic building on River Street where the Savannah River glittered under string lights and the air smelled like salt and opportunity. Margaret stood outside for a full minute before walking in, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was insane. She was having dinner with Louis Gray, her CEO, a billionaire. A man so far out of her league they weren't even playing the same game. She should leave. Call him. Make an excuse. But then she thought about Veronica's smug face in that meeting. About 2 years of being invisible. About being 35 years old and wondering if this was all her life would ever be. So she walked inside. Louis was already there, sitting at a corner table with a view of the river. He stood when he saw her, and Margaret noticed, not for the first time, that he was tall. 6'1", maybe 6'2". Dark hair with silver threading through at the temples. Gray eyes that seemed to see everything. Handsome in that way that came from good genes, expensive haircuts, and complete confidence. Margaret, he said, pulling out her chair. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, she replied automatically, sitting down and immediately regretting every clothing choice she'd made in the past hour. Her black dress was nice but not expensive. Her shoes were comfortable but not designer. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who made $62,000 a year trying to have dinner with a man worth $3 billion. Wine? Louis asked, and she nodded because she desperately needed something to do with her hands. They ordered. She let him recommend dishes because the menu was in French and she wasn't about to embarrass herself. And then they were alone with expensive wine and the weight of whatever this conversation was supposed to be. I'm going to be direct, Louis said, leaning back in his chair with the ease of someone who'd never had to worry about anything in his life. You're being wasted in Veronica's department. Your work is exceptional. Your insights are innovative. And you're systematically being overlooked because Veronica sees you as a threat. Margaret's fingers tightened on her wine glass. She's my boss. I can't. She's stealing from you. Credit is currency in this industry, and she's been robbing you blind for 18 months. He paused. Why do you let her? The question hit like a slap. I don't. It's not that simple. Isn't it? No. Margaret set down her glass before she broke it. No, it's not. Because if I push back, she'll fire me. And I need this job. I have bills. I have student loans. I don't have family to fall back on, or, she stopped herself. I can't afford to make waves. What if I told you that you could? What if I offered you a position where your work would be recognized? Where you'd be compensated fairly? Where you'd never have to watch someone else take credit for your ideas again? Margaret's breath caught. What kind of position? Director of Strategic Innovation. You'd report directly to me. You'd have your own team. Your own projects. Your own credit. That's 3 levels above where I am now. And you're 3 levels more qualified than the person currently doing the job. Lewis leaned forward. I've been watching you, Margaret. Not in a creepy way, he smiled. In a business way. You stay late. You come in early. You produce work that's consistently better than anyone in your department, including your boss. You're exactly what I need for this position. Why me? The question came out small. Why not promote from within? Why not hire someone with experience at this level? Because experience doesn't equal competence. And because I built this company on recognizing talent wherever I find it. He paused. Also because I'm tired of watching good people get stepped on by mediocre people who are better at office politics than actual work. Margaret felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. Not here. Not now. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course. But Margaret. He waited until she met his eyes. Think about what you want. Not what you think you deserve. Not what you think you can get. What you actually want. What she wanted. When was the last time anyone had asked her that? The food arrived, and the conversation shifted to safer topics. The company. The industry. Savannah's charm. Lewis was easy to talk to once the pressure was off. Funny, self-deprecating in a way that felt genuine rather than performative. He asked about her master's thesis. Her favorite books. What she did when she wasn't working. Work, Margaret admitted. Mostly. I don't have much of a life outside the office. Why not? Because. She stopped. Thought about it. Because I guess I stopped trying somewhere along the way. After my mom died, and my brother moved to California, and I realized I was alone. It was easier to just work. Be invisible. Not want things. That sounds lonely. It is. She surprised herself with the honesty. But it's safe. Nobody can take anything from you if you don't have anything to take. Lewis was quiet for a moment. Then, what if I told you that's no way to live? I'd say you're probably right. But I wouldn't know how to do it differently. Then maybe it's time to learn. They talked until the restaurant closed. Until Margaret realized she'd laughed more in 3 hours than she had in 3 months. Until she felt like someone actually saw her, really saw her, for the first time in years. I should go, she said finally, reluctantly. Let me drive you home. You don't have to. Margaret. That tone again. The one that made her name sound important. Let me drive you home. So she did. Let him drive her to her modest apartment in a neighborhood that probably made his security team nervous. Let him walk her to her door. Let herself hope for just a second that this could be real. Think about my offer, Lewis said at her doorway. But also think about having dinner with me again. Not business. Just dinner. That sounds like a date. It would be. If you said yes. Margaret's heart did something complicated in her chest. I'll think about that too. Good. He smiled. Good night, Margaret. Good night, Mr. Gray. Lewis. We're colleagues now. Possibly friends. Definitely not Mr. Gray. She laughed despite herself. Good night, Louis. She watched him walk back to his car, a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than her annual salary, and wondered if this was real or if she'd wake up tomorrow and realize it was all a dream. But when she checked her phone, there was a text from an unknown number. It's Louis. Thank you for tonight. And for the record, you're not invisible. You never were. Some of us have been seeing you all along. Margaret read the message 3 times before she let herself believe it. Then she replied, "Thank you. For everything." And for the first time in years, she went to bed feeling like maybe, just maybe, things were about to change. Alright, I need to know, are you shipping Louis and Margaret yet? Drop a heart emoji if you want this to happen. Monday morning, Margaret walked into Veronica's office and resigned. Well, not resigned exactly. Transferred. To a position Veronica didn't even know existed until Margaret handed her the official paperwork signed by Louis Gray himself. Director of Strategic Innovation? Veronica's face went through several shades of red. That's not. You can't just. Mr. Gray approved the transfer. It's effective immediately. Margaret kept her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. I've documented all my current projects and created transition notes for whoever takes over my role. This is inappropriate. You went above my head. I accepted a promotion. That's not inappropriate. That's career advancement. Veronica stood, and for a second, Margaret thought she might actually throw something. Instead, she smiled. Cold. Calculated. Mean. You think sleeping with the CEO is going to help your career? Everyone's going to know exactly how you got this position. The accusation hit like a physical blow, but Margaret didn't flinch. I earned this position with 2 years of work that you took credit for. The entire executive team knows it. And if you want to spread rumors about how I got promoted, I'm happy to discuss with HR exactly how you've been falsifying project reports and claiming my work is yours. Veronica went pale. You can't prove. I have every email, every document, every piece of evidence showing which ideas came from me and which reports you submitted as your own. Margaret leaned forward. I didn't fight back before because I needed this job. But I don't need to work for you anymore. So if you want to start a war, Veronica, I promise I'll win it. She'd never seen her boss speechless before. It felt good. Margaret turned and walked out, her knees shaking but her head high. Her new office was on the executive floor. Actual walls instead of a cubicle. Windows overlooking the Savannah River. A door she could close. Space to breathe. Louis stopped by around noon. How'd it go? He asked, leaning against her doorframe like he belonged there. Veronica threatened to tell everyone I slept with you to get promoted. His expression darkened. She said that. I told her I'd bury her in evidence of workplace theft if she did. Louis laughed, a real laugh that lit up his whole face. Remind me never to cross you. You're my boss. Crossing you would be a bad career move. I'm not your boss anymore. Your new role reports to me, but we're colleagues. Partners, even. He smiled. And I'm hoping we'll be friends. Friends. With Louis Gray. A week ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was friends with a billionaire CEO. I'd like that, Margaret said honestly. Good. Because I'm taking you to lunch. Team building. Colleague bonding. Whatever excuse makes you say yes. Is this how you treat all your directors? No. But then again, none of them are you. Real talk, do you think Margaret should trust Louis this fast, or should she be more careful? Let me know in the comments. The weeks blurred together in the best possible way. Margaret built her team, hand-picked people who'd been overlooked and undervalued, just like she had been. She pitched projects directly to the board. She saw her name on reports. She watched her ideas become company strategy without someone else taking credit. And somewhere in the middle of all that, she and Louis became something. Not dating. Not yet. But eating lunch together more days than not. Staying late to discuss strategy and ending up talking about everything else instead. Finding excuses to be in each other's orbit. You're different, her brother Thomas said during their first video call in months. Happier. I got promoted. And a raise. A big raise. It's not the money. You're smiling. When's the last time I saw you actually smile? Margaret thought about it. Mom's funeral. When you told that story about her trying to parallel park. Jesus, Mags. That was 4 years ago. I know. So what changed? She almost told him about Louis. About dinners that turned into late-night conversations. About the way Louis looked at her like she mattered. About how she'd started hoping for things she thought she'd given up on. Instead, she said, I'm finally doing work I'm proud of. With people who value me. Good. You deserve that. You've always deserved that. After they hung up, Margaret sat in her apartment, the nice one she'd just moved into, with actual space and natural light, and thought about what she deserved. She'd spent so long accepting scraps that she'd forgotten she could ask for more. Her phone buzzed. Louis. Working late again? At home, actually. Novel concept, I know. Even more novel. Want to grab dinner? Not business. Not colleagues. Just dinner. Her heart stuttered. This was it. The moment where colleague became something else. Is this a date? Only if you want it to be. Margaret stared at her phone. Thought about safe versus sorry. Invisible versus seen. The old Margaret versus whoever she was becoming. Yes. It's a date. Good. I'll pick you up at 7. She had 2 hours to figure out what you wore on a date with a billionaire. 2 hours to convince herself this was real. 2 hours to prepare for whatever came next. And for the first time in years, Margaret Freed wasn't scared. She was ready. Are you ready for their first date? Because things are about to get very interesting. Stay with me. Louis picked her up in the Mercedes, but this time he got out and came to her door. Handed her flowers, peonies, her favorite, though she'd never told him. How did you know? She asked. You have a photo on your desk. You and your mother. She's holding peonies. Margaret felt her throat tighten. You notice everything, don't you? Only the things that matter. The restaurant was small, intimate, not the kind of place CEOs usually took dates. No pretension. No show. Just good food and privacy and the kind of atmosphere that invited real conversation. Tell me about your mother, Louis said over wine that probably cost more than Margaret used to make in a week. Why? Because you mention her sometimes. In passing. Like she's still here in small ways. And I want to know who she was. No one ever asked about her mother anymore. Thomas avoided the topic. Her friends had stopped asking years ago. But Louis was looking at her with genuine interest, and Margaret found herself wanting to tell him. She was a force, Margaret said. High school English teacher. Could quote Shakespeare and Maya Angelou and make both feel relevant to teenagers who thought they didn't care. She raised me and Thomas alone after our dad left, and she never let us feel like we were missing anything. You were close. She was my best friend. When she died, Margaret stopped. Started again. When she died, I lost my person. The one who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. And I've been trying to prove I'm worth something ever since. You don't have to prove that to anyone. Don't I? I'm 35, Louis. Single. No family to speak of. Working myself to death for recognition from people who don't value me. If my mom could see me now, she'd be proud, Louis interrupted firmly. She'd see a woman who earned a master's degree, who's brilliant at her job, who survived loss and loneliness and came out stronger. She'd be so proud, Margaret. The tears came before she could stop them. Louis handed her his napkin without comment, just waited while she composed herself. Sorry, she managed. This is a terrible first date. This is a perfect first date. You're real. That's rare in my world. Your world of billionaires and business deals? My world of people who want something from me. Money, connections, access. You're the first person in years who wanted nothing. I wanted recognition for my work, which you earned. But you didn't want me to give it to you. You wanted to deserve it. He reached across the table and took her hand. That's different. His touch sent electricity up her arm. This was dangerous. This feeling. This hope. Tell me about you, Margaret said, needing to shift the focus. The real you. Not Forbes magazine Louis Gray. Just you. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm 38 years old. I built a company from nothing because I was too proud to work for anyone else. I'm a workaholic because it's easier than having a life. I've dated beautiful women who didn't know anything about me beyond my net worth. And I'm lonely in a way that money can't fix. The honesty floored her. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked. And because I'm tired of pretending I'm fine when I'm not. You do that, don't you? Pretend you're fine. All the time. Then let's make a deal. We don't pretend with each other. No masks. No performance. Just honest. Margaret squeezed his hand. I can do that. They talked until the restaurant closed. Until Margaret realized she'd told him things she'd never told anyone. About the panic attacks after her mother died, about the loneliness that felt like drowning, about being so tired of being strong all the time. And Louis told her about his father who'd called him a failure when he left corporate law to start his company. About working 80-hour weeks for years because he had something to prove. About waking up one day and realizing he'd built an empire but forgotten to build a life. Why me? Margaret asked as they walked along the riverfront, the savannah night warm and sweet. You could have anyone. Why someone like me? Someone like you? You mean someone real? Someone brilliant. Someone who makes me remember what it feels like to want to go home at the end of the day because there's someone worth going home to. He stopped walking and turned to face her. You're not someone like you, Margaret. You're exactly who I've been looking for without knowing I was looking. I'm scared, she admitted. This feels too good. Too fast. Like it's going to disappear. Then let's make it real. Let's not disappear. He kissed her. Right there on River Street with tourists walking past and the sound of riverboats in the distance. Kissed her like she was precious and wanted and everything he'd been missing. And Margaret kissed him back. Let herself hope. Let herself believe that maybe she deserved this after all. Okay, I have to know. Are you as obsessed with them as I am? Comment, yes, if you're rooting for Margaret and Louis. They kept it quiet. Professional at work. Partners in private. Margaret's team didn't know. The executive board didn't know. Veronica definitely didn't know, though she shot daggers at Margaret every time they crossed paths in the hallway. She's going to figure it out eventually, Margaret said one evening at Louis's house. A beautiful historic home in the Victorian district that somehow felt more like a home than a showpiece. Let her. Louis was cooking dinner, which apparently was something billionaire CEOs did when they weren't being billionaire CEOs. We're not doing anything wrong. Aren't we? Office romance. Power dynamic. Every HR nightmare in the book. You don't report to me anymore. We're equals professionally. And personally, he looked at her over his shoulder. I don't give a damn what people think. Easy to say when you're the CEO. Fair point. He plated pasta that looked like it belonged in a restaurant and brought it to the table. So what do you want to do? We can go public. Or we can keep this between us for a while longer. Whatever makes you comfortable. Margaret thought about it. About walking into the office as Louis Gray's girlfriend. About the whispers. The assumptions. The comments about how she'd gotten her promotion. Can we wait? Just until I've proven myself in this role. Until people can't say I only got where I am because of who I'm dating. You've already proven yourself. But yes, we can wait. He took her hand. I'm not going anywhere, Margaret. Take all the time you need. That night, lying in Louis's bed with his arm around her and the city lights glowing through floor-to-ceiling windows, Margaret felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Tell me something no one else knows about you, she said into the darkness. Louis was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, I'm scared of being my father. Your father. Richard Gray. Corporate lawyer. Absent parent. Workaholic who measured worth in billable hours and partnerships. He barely knew me growing up. Work was always more important. And I swore I'd never be like him. He paused. But I built a company that requires 80-hour weeks. I put business before everything. I'm exactly what I swore I wouldn't become. You're here now, Margaret pointed out. With me. Not at the office. Because you make me want to be here. Before you, I didn't have a reason to leave work. You're changing me, Margaret. Making me remember there's more to life than board meetings and profit margins. She kissed his shoulder. You're changing me too. Making me remember I'm allowed to want things. To be visible. To matter. You've always mattered. Not like this. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in years, Margaret didn't have nightmares about being alone. But 3 months into their secret relationship, everything changed. The company was hosting its annual gala, a massive event where every executive, every board member, every important client would be in attendance. Black tie, champagne, networking disguised as celebration. You have to come, Louis said when Margaret tried to bow out. You're a director now. It's expected. I'll go. I just don't want to. Make it obvious. I know. He pulled her close. But Margaret, I'm tired of hiding. Tired of pretending you're just another colleague. Tired of watching other men look at you and not being able to tell them you're mine. Possessive much. When it comes to you. Absolutely. She laughed despite the nerves twisting in her stomach. What if we tell people? What if they think? Let them think whatever they want. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's all that matters. Easy for you to say. So let me make it easy for you. Louis got down on one knee, and Margaret's heart stopped. Marry me. What? I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. I know we've only been together 3 months. But Margaret, I love you. I want everyone to know I love you. I want to stop hiding and pretending and worrying about what people think. Marry me. Come to the gala as my fiancé. Let me show the world that you're mine and I'm yours and nothing else matters. Louis. You don't have to answer now. Think about it. But I'm asking. Publicly, privately, I don't care. I want to marry you, Margaret Freed. Margaret stared at the ring, a simple, stunning diamond that caught the light and held it. Stared at Louis on his knee looking at her like she was everything. Stared at the future he was offering. And heard herself say, yes. Wait, what? Did she just say yes? Are you as shocked as I am? Drop a comment now. They told no one. Not yet. The gala was in 2 weeks, and they wanted to control the narrative. Wanted to announce it together. Wanted to see the look on Veronica's face when she realized exactly how wrong she'd been about everything. Petty? Margaret asked as they discussed strategy. Extremely, Louis agreed. But well-deserved. Margaret's team noticed something had changed. She was lighter. Happier. Actually leaving the office before 8 p.m. most nights. You're glowing, her deputy director Camille said one afternoon. New skincare routine or secret boyfriend? Just happy with the work we're doing, Margaret deflected. Aha. And I'm the Queen of England. Camille grinned. Whoever he is, He's good for you. If only she knew. The week before the gala, Margaret's brother called. I'm coming to Savannah, Thomas announced. For the weekend. Need to see my sister. Make sure this new job hasn't killed her with stress. I'm fine, Thomas. You say that. But I need to verify it in person. Also, I hear there's some fancy company party happening. Can you get your favorite brother a +1? You're my only brother. Which makes me the favorite by default. So, +1. Margaret thought fast. Having Thomas there meant she'd have family present when Louis proposed. Meant she wouldn't be completely alone in a room full of people who'd either ignored or mocked her. I can probably arrange that. Excellent. Also, Mom would want me to ask, are you dating anyone? The question caught her off guard. Why? Because you sound happy. Really happy. And the last time we talked about dating, you told me you'd given up on men entirely and were considering becoming a cat lady. I never said that. You heavily implied it. So, anyone special? Maybe, Margaret admitted. It's new. But, yeah, there's someone. Good. Mom would be proud. You deserve to be happy, Mags. The gala was at the Savannah International Trade Center. Massive, elegant, the kind of venue that screamed money and power. Margaret wore a dress Louis had insisted on buying her. Midnight blue silk that made her skin glow and cost more than her first car. You're beautiful, he'd said when she tried it on. But you could wear a paper bag and still be the most stunning woman in the room. That's the cheesiest line I've ever heard. Doesn't make it less true. Now, standing in the ballroom surrounded by hundreds of people in expensive clothes drinking expensive champagne, Margaret felt out of place. Like everyone could tell she didn't belong. Relax, Thomas whispered beside her. He'd arrived that afternoon, and she'd caught him up on everything. The promotion, the relationship, the impending proposal. You look like you're about to face a firing squad. I feel like I am. Veronica's here. Half the people who ignored me for 2 years are here. And in about an hour, Louis is going to tell everyone you're getting married. Yeah. Mom would love this. It's very dramatic. Mom would think I'm insane. Mom would think you're brave. There's a difference. Across the room, Margaret saw Veronica holding court with a group of executives, probably taking credit for someone else's work. Saw the people who'd walked past her desk for 2 years without seeing her. Saw the company that had made her invisible. And then she saw Louis. He was surrounded by board members and investors, playing the CEO role perfectly. But his eyes found hers across the room, and he smiled. Just for her. He really loves you, Thomas observed. You can see it from here. I know. Do you love him back? Yeah. I really do. Then stop worrying about what everyone else thinks. This is your moment, Mags. Own it. The dinner was formal. Seated arrangements, carefully orchestrated networking. Margaret ended up at a table with other directors, including Veronica's replacement in her old department. I heard you got promoted over Veronica, the woman, Stephanie, said. Good for you. She was a nightmare to work under. She took credit for everything Margaret did, another director added. Everyone knew. HR knew. We were all wondering when someone would finally do something about it. Margaret blinked. Everyone knew. Of course. Veronica's not half as clever as she thinks she is. We're just glad someone finally called her out. It was vindication and validation all at once. She hadn't been crazy. She hadn't been paranoid. Everyone had seen what was happening, and they'd been waiting for her to stand up for herself. After dinner came speeches. The chairman of the board. The CFO. And finally, Louis. He took the stage with the confidence of a man who'd built an empire from nothing. Talked about the company's success. The team's innovation. The future they were building together. And then he looked directly at Margaret. But tonight, he said, I want to talk about something else. About recognizing excellence wherever you find it. About giving credit where it's due. About valuing people not for who they know or how well they play politics, but for the quality of their work. Margaret's heart started racing. 6 months ago, I met someone who reminded me why I started this company. Someone whose brilliance had been overlooked and undervalued. Someone who deserved so much more than she was getting. Oh God, he was doing this. Really doing this. Margaret Freed, Lewis said, and suddenly every eye in the room was on her. Could you come up here? Drop a comment right now. Is this really happening? Margaret's legs didn't want to move. Thomas gave her a gentle push, and suddenly she was walking, through tables, past faces she recognized, toward the stage where Lewis stood waiting. The room was completely silent. She climbed the stairs, and Lewis took her hand. Steady. Grounding. Real. 6 months ago, he continued, speaking to the room but looking at her, Margaret was working for someone who took credit for her ideas. Someone who made her feel invisible. Someone who almost convinced her that she didn't deserve more. Across the room, Veronica had gone pale. But Margaret is brilliant. She's innovative. She's the reason 3 of our biggest client accounts renewed this year. She's the brain behind the strategic initiatives that increased our market share by 15%. She's exceptional. And for too long, no one recognized that. He turned to face her fully now. But I see you, Margaret. I've been seeing you from the moment I found you working alone on a Friday night, giving everything to a company that was taking you for granted. And I fell in love with the woman who didn't know how extraordinary she was. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. This wasn't just a proposal. This was a public declaration. An announcement. A statement that she mattered. I fell in love with your kindness. Your intelligence. Your quiet strength. The way you fight for what's right even when it's hard. The way you make me want to be better. The way you make me believe in things I thought I'd stopped believing in. He got down on one knee, and the room gasped collectively. I asked you this 2 weeks ago in private. Tonight, I'm asking you in front of everyone who matters in my professional life. Margaret Freed, will you marry me? The room waited. Every eye on her. Every breath held. Margaret looked at Lewis, at this man who'd seen her when no one else had. Who'd valued her when everyone else overlooked her. Who'd given her back her voice and her power and her belief that she deserved good things. Yes, she said clearly, loudly, so everyone could hear. Yes, I'll marry you. The room exploded. Applause. Cheers. Lewis slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her. A real kiss, the kind that said she was his and he was hers and nothing else mattered. When they pulled apart, the ballroom was on its feet. People she'd never spoken to were clapping. Executives were smiling. Even the chairman of the board looked pleased. And Veronica looked like she'd swallowed glass. Ladies and gentlemen, Lewis said into the microphone, his arm around Margaret's waist, my fiancée, the brilliant Margaret Freed. They left the stage to continued applause, and suddenly Margaret was surrounded. People congratulating her. Colleagues she'd worked beside for 2 years suddenly remembering her name. Executives wanting to discuss her projects. Thomas reached her first, pulling her into a hug. Mom would be so proud, he whispered. So damn proud. I wish she was here, Margaret whispered back. She is. Trust me. She's here. The rest of the night was a blur. People kept approaching, some genuine, some opportunistic, all suddenly very interested in Margaret Freed who'd been invisible for 2 years and was now the CEO's fiancée. This is nauseating, Margaret muttered to Lewis when they finally got a moment alone. Half these people have never said 2 words to me. Welcome to my world. Wait until the wedding. You'll discover relatives you didn't know you had. I only have Thomas. You have me now. And my father, though he's complicated. And a whole company full of people who are going to suddenly pretend they always valued you. Just what I wanted. Lewis laughed and pulled her close. You okay? Really? I think so. This is surreal. Yesterday, I was just. You were never just anything. You just finally have the recognition you always deserved. Veronica approached then, and Margaret's stomach clenched. Congratulations, Veronica said through clenched teeth. I suppose I underestimated you. You did, Margaret agreed pleasantly. But I'm grateful. If you hadn't taken credit for my work, I never would have caught Mr. Gray's attention. So thank you. Veronica's smile was poisonous. Everyone knows how you really got that promotion. And now this. You must be very good at. Careful, Louis interrupted, his voice sharp enough to cut. My fiancée just gave you credit for inadvertently improving her career. Don't ruin the moment by making me explain to HR why your employment was terminated. Veronica went white. You can't fire me for making baseless accusations about an executive? For creating a hostile work environment? For harassment? Louis smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Actually, I can. And I will. Unless you apologize to Margaret right now and promise that nothing like this will ever happen again. The people around them had gone quiet. Watching. I apologize, Veronica said flatly. Good. Now go enjoy the party. And Veronica? Margaret's going to be around for a very long time. As my wife. As a director of this company. Get used to it. Veronica fled. Margaret turned to Louis. That was necessary. Nobody talks to you like that. Not anymore. I could have handled her. I know. But you shouldn't have to. Not tonight. Tonight you get to celebrate. And she did. Danced with Louis while everyone watched. Laughed with Thomas. Accepted congratulations from people who meant it and people who didn't. Wore her ring like armor. And when the night ended, when she and Louis finally escaped to his car, Margaret looked at her reflection in the window and saw someone new. Not invisible Margaret. Not overlooked Margaret. Just Margaret. Seen. Valued. Loved. Ready to go home? Louis asked. Home. His place had become that. Their place. Yeah, she said, taking his hand. Let's go home. You guys, I'm crying. Are you crying? Tell me you're crying. Comment below. The next morning, Margaret woke up to her phone exploding. Texts from colleagues she barely knew. Emails from executives. A voice message from her old college roommate who'd seen photos from the gala on social media. Apparently, a billionaire CEO proposing to his employee at a company event was news. Make it stop, she groaned, burying her face in Louis's shoulder. Sorry. This is what happens when you get engaged to someone whose net worth makes headlines. He was scrolling through his own phone, looking amused. Though I have to say, the PR team loves this. Billionaire CEO finds love with overlooked employee. They're calling it a modern Cinderella story. That's mortifying. That's reality. We're interesting. People want to know our story. Our story is private. Not anymore. He kissed her forehead. But we'll manage it together. No interviews we don't want to do. No photos we don't approve. We control the narrative. The first week was overwhelming. People magazine wanted an interview. Forbes wanted to do a profile. Local news wanted to cover Savannah's most romantic engagement. Margaret said no to all of it. I just want to do my job, she told Louis over dinner at his house. Their house, technically, since she'd started spending more nights there than at her apartment. I don't want to be famous for being your fiancé. Then don't be. Be famous for being brilliant at your job. Which you are. People are going to say I only got where I am because of you. Let them. You know the truth. I know the truth. Anyone who matters knows the truth. But it bothered her. The whispers. The looks. The sudden interest in her work that felt less like genuine appreciation and more like people trying to get close to the CEO's fiancée. "This is why you wanted to wait," Thomas said during one of their video calls. "To prove yourself first." "Yeah. But now I don't know if I'll ever be able to separate who I am from who he is." Margaret Fried, director, versus Margaret Fried, Louis Gray's fiancée. So be both. You don't have to choose. Easier said than done. At work, things shifted. Some people treated her the same. Camille, her deputy director, was still Camille. Her team still respected her. But others were different. Deferential in a way that felt wrong. Trying too hard. Assuming she had more power than she actually did because of her relationship with Louis. "Someone asked me to intercede with you about their project approval," she told Louis one night. "They assumed I could just tell you to greenlight it." "What did you say?" "That they should submit a formal proposal like everyone else. And that my engagement ring doesn't come with CEO privileges." "Good. Because it doesn't. You're my fiancé. Not my co-CEO. Those are separate things. Tell that to the 10 people who've tried to use me to get to you this week. Want me to send out a company-wide email? Leave my fiancée alone, she's not your shortcut to the CEO's office." Margaret laughed despite her frustration. "That would definitely make things worse." "Probably. But it would be satisfying." The planning for the wedding started, and that brought its own complications. Louis's father wanted a huge society event. Thomas wanted something small and meaningful. Louis wanted whatever made Margaret happy. And Margaret didn't know what she wanted beyond marrying the man she loved. "We could elope," Louis suggested one evening when they were drowning in invitation mock-ups and seating charts. "Just go to City Hall. You, me, Thomas. Skip all the drama." "Your father would never forgive us." "My father barely speaks to me anyway. He's never forgiven me for leaving corporate law to start my own company. Why should I care if he's upset about the wedding?" "Because he's your father. Because family matters, even when they're complicated." Louis pulled her close. "You're too good. You know that. I'm practical. We do the wedding your father wants, we avoid conflict. We keep the peace. Or we do the wedding we want, and he deals with it." Margaret thought about her mother. About how she'd want Margaret to be happy. About how she'd probably tell her to stop worrying about what everyone else wanted and focus on what mattered. Marrying the man she loved. Compromise, Margaret decided. Small ceremony. Immediate family only. But nice venue, good food, the things that matter to your father. We make it meaningful without making it a circus. "I can work with that." They settled on a date, 6 months away, which gave them time to plan without rushing but wasn't so far that they had to wait forever. A small ceremony at one of Savannah's historic mansions. Dinner reception. Intimate. Personal. Theirs. "Your mother would love this," Thomas said when Margaret told him the plan. "Simple and beautiful and focused on what matters." "I hope so. I wish she was here." "She is, Mags. She's been here through all of it. Every moment you doubted yourself and kept going anyway. Every time you chose brave over safe. She's so proud of you." Margaret felt tears threatening for the 100th time that week. "Thanks, Tommy. Also, I get to walk you down the aisle, right? Because if some random uncle crawls out of the woodwork, you're walking me down the aisle. Obviously. Good. Because Mom would haunt me if I let anyone else do it." At work, Margaret's project, a complete overhaul of the company's client retention strategy, was approved by the board. Her idea. Her plan. Her presentation. And everyone in that room knew it was hers, regardless of whose ring was on her finger. "Brilliant work, Margaret," the chairman said after her presentation. "This could revolutionize how we approach client relationships." Louis caught her eye across the conference table and smiled. Proud. Happy. Her partner in every sense of the word. After the meeting, Camille pulled her aside. You know everyone's going to assume Louis approved this because you're engaged to him. Let them. I know I earned this. Good. Because you did. That presentation was flawless. The engagement ring is just a nice accessory. Margaret laughed. That's one way to put it. So, when's the wedding? Do I get an invite? 6 months. And yes, you're invited. You and the whole team. Excellent. I need to witness the moment Veronica realizes she has to watch you marry a billionaire after she spent 2 years treating you like garbage. That's petty. That's justified. That woman tried to ruin your career. And instead, she inadvertently made it better. So I'm choosing to be grateful. Camille shook her head. You're a better person than me. I'd be gloating. Trust me. The fact that I'm getting married to Louis while she's still bitter and alone? That's enough gloating for me. That night, lying in bed with Louis reading beside her and her engagement ring catching the light from his bedside lamp, Margaret felt something settle in her chest. Peace. Contentment. The bone-deep knowledge that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. What are you thinking about? Louis asked, setting down his book. How different my life is now compared to 6 months ago. Better. So much better. 6 months ago, I was invisible. Overlooked. Convinced I didn't deserve more. And now, she looked at her ring. Now I'm engaged to the man I love. Doing work I'm proud of. Visible. Valued. It feels like a dream. It's not a dream. It's real. You're real. We're real. He pulled her close. And in 6 months, you're going to be my wife. Margaret Gray. That's going to take some getting used to. You don't have to change your name if you don't want to. I want to. I want everyone to know I'm yours. You've always been mine. From that first night, I found you working late. I just had to convince you of it. Margaret kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. Love. Gratitude. Hope. The bone-deep knowledge that she'd found her person. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, Margaret Fried felt like she was home. The 6 months flew by in a whirlwind of planning, projects, and stolen moments between work and wedding preparations. Margaret had expected the planning to be stressful, and parts of it were, but mostly it felt like building something beautiful with the person she loved. Louis's father, Richard Gray, had softened slightly when he met Margaret. Not warm, exactly, but less hostile than Louis had feared. She's smart, Richard had said after their first dinner together, as if Margaret couldn't hear him from the next room. Good head on her shoulders. Better than those socialites you used to date. High praise from Richard Gray, Louis had muttered. He once told me my company was an acceptable risk. I think he likes me, Margaret had whispered. He does. Which is unprecedented. I think you might be the first person he's approved of in 30 years. Now, standing in the bridal suite of the historic Mercer House, Margaret looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. The dress was simple, ivory silk, elegant lines, nothing too fussy. Her mother would have loved it. You look beautiful, Mags, Thomas said from the doorway, his voice thick. Mom would be. He stopped, cleared his throat. She'd be so happy for you. I wish she was here. She is. I can feel her. She's proud of you. Proud of who you've become. Camille knocked and entered, stunning in her bridesmaid dress. The planner says we're 5 minutes out. You ready? Was she ready? To marry Louis Gray? To become Margaret Gray? To step fully into this new life where she was seen and valued and loved? Yeah, Margaret said, surprised by how steady her voice was. I'm ready. The ceremony was in the mansion's garden, under a canopy of oak trees dripping with Spanish moss. 50 people, intimate by Billionaire standards, perfect by Margaret's. Her team. Louis's executive staff. Thomas. Richard Gray sitting in the front row looking almost emotional. The handful of friends who'd stayed in touch through her invisible years. And Louis, waiting at the altar in a perfectly tailored suit, looking at her like she was the only person in the world. Thomas walked her down the aisle, his hand steady on her arm. "This is it, little sister. Your happy ending." "It's not an ending," Margaret whispered back. "It's a beginning. Even better." He placed her hand in Louis's, kissed her cheek, and stepped back. Louis's hands were warm, steady. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "So beautiful. You're not so bad yourself." The officiant began, but Margaret barely heard the words. She was too focused on Louis, on the way he looked at her, on the promises they were about to make. "Louis Gray, do you take Margaret Freed to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do. Forever and always, I do." "Margaret Freed, do you take Louis Gray to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Margaret thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago. Invisible. Overlooked. Convinced she didn't deserve love or recognition or happiness. Thought about how far she'd come. How much she'd grown. "I do," she said clearly. "With everything I am, I do." The rings. The kiss. The applause. And suddenly Margaret was Mrs. Gray, married to the man who'd seen her when no one else had. "I love you," Louis whispered against her lips. "My brilliant, beautiful wife. I love you too. My stubborn, wonderful husband." The reception was perfect. Toasts from Thomas that made everyone laugh and cry. A speech from Richard Gray that was surprisingly warm. Dancing under string lights while the sun set over Savannah. And everywhere Margaret looked, she saw people who valued her. Not because of who she'd married, but because of who she was. Veronica hadn't been invited, obviously. But Margaret heard later that she'd left the company 2 months ago. Fired after an internal investigation revealed she'd been falsifying reports and taking credit for work that wasn't hers. Karma, Margaret thought, had a way of working itself out. "What are you thinking about?" Louis asked as they swayed to a slow song, his arms around her waist. "How different everything is. How happy I am. How grateful." "Me too. Every day, I wake up grateful that I found you working late that Friday night. Best overtime I ever worked." He laughed and pulled her closer. "Ready for our honeymoon?" They were leaving for 2 weeks in Italy, Florence, Rome, the Amalfi Coast. 2 weeks of just them, away from work and responsibilities and everyone who wanted a piece of the CEO or his wife. "So ready. Though I have to admit, I'm going to miss work." "You're a workaholic. Just like me. We're perfect for each other." "We really are." Later that night, after the reception ended and the guests departed, Margaret and Louis stood on the balcony of their hotel suite overlooking the Savannah River. The city sparkled below them, alive with possibility. "Mrs. Gray," Louis said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "How does it feel?" Margaret leaned back against him, her wedding ring catching the moonlight. "It feels right. Like everything that happened before, all the hard parts, all the lonely parts, was leading me here. To you. To us. I used to think building my company was my greatest achievement," Louis said quietly. "But finding you, loving you, being loved by you, that's everything. You're everything. You saved me," Margaret whispered. "From being invisible. From giving up. From forgetting I deserved more. No. You saved yourself. I just reminded you of what was always there." He turned her to face him. "You're brilliant, Margaret. You always were. I just made sure everyone else saw it too." They stood there together, husband and wife, watching the city below and the stars above. 2 people who'd been lonely finding home in each other. 2 workaholics learning to build a life, not just a career. 2 souls who'd been invisible in their own ways, finally seen. "Ready for forever?" Louis asked. Margaret kissed him, pouring every ounce of love and hope and joy into it. With you. Absolutely. Margaret Gray stood at the podium in the Gray Tech Auditorium, looking out at 200 faces, employees, executives, new hires attending their first company-wide meeting. A year ago, she would have been terrified. Now, she felt calm, confident, ready. "Good morning," she said, and the room quieted instantly. "For those who don't know me, I'm Margaret Gray, Chief Innovation Officer." The promotion had come 3 months ago. Lewis had insisted she'd earned it, and this time, everyone agreed. Her client retention strategy had increased revenue by 23%. Her team had launched 4 major initiatives, all successful. She'd proven herself a dozen times over. The fact that she was married to the CEO was almost beside the point now. "I want to talk today about being overlooked," Margaret continued. "About being invisible. About working hard and watching other people take credit. About wondering if you'll ever get the recognition you deserve." She saw people leaning forward. Listening. Really listening. 2 years ago, I was that person. Brilliant work. Zero recognition. I let someone take credit for my ideas for 18 months because I was scared. Scared of losing my job. Scared of making waves. Scared of believing I deserved better. Across the room, she caught Lewis's eye. He was standing in the back, arms crossed, smiling with pride. "But here's what I learned. You teach people how to treat you. When you accept less than you deserve, you tell people that's all you're worth. When you stay silent about injustice, you give it permission to continue. And when you let fear control your choices, you make yourself invisible." The room was completely silent. "So I'm here to tell you, don't be invisible. Speak up. Stand up for your work. Demand the recognition you've earned. And if you work for someone who steals your credit, document everything and take it to HR. Or to me. Or to Mr. Gray. Because at this company, we value integrity. We value honesty. And we value the people who do the real work." Applause erupted, genuine, enthusiastic. Margaret saw nodding heads, people wiping their eyes, others sitting up straighter. After the meeting, a young woman approached her, mid-20s, nervous, clutching a folder. "Mrs. Gray? Can I talk to you?" "Of course. And call me Margaret. I'm Sophia Chen. I work in the data analysis department. And I think my supervisor has been taking credit for my work." Margaret's heart clenched. This was exactly why she'd given that speech. "Tell me everything," she said, guiding Sophia to a quiet corner. "And bring me your documentation. We're going to fix this." By the end of the week, Sophia had been promoted and her supervisor was being investigated by HR. Margaret made sure everyone in the company knew about it. Made sure people understood that theft of intellectual work would not be tolerated. "You're changing the culture," Lewis said that evening over dinner at home. The beautiful Victorian house that was truly theirs now, filled with Margaret's books and Lewis's art collection and the life they'd built together. "I'm trying. Nobody should have to go through what I went through. You're inspiring people. Giving them courage to stand up for themselves. That's powerful, Margaret." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I learned from the best. You saw me when no one else did. You gave me the courage to believe I deserved more. You always deserved more. I just made sure you got it." That weekend, Margaret and Thomas visited their mother's grave. It was something she did once a month now, bringing flowers, talking to the headstone like her mom could hear. "Hey Mom," Margaret said, kneeling on the grass. "Sorry it's been a few weeks. Work has been crazy. Good crazy though." Thomas stood beside her, quiet and supportive like always. "I'm Chief Innovation Officer now. Can you believe it? Me. The girl who used to cry in your office because I didn't think I was smart enough for grad school." Margaret laughed, tears already forming. "I wish you could meet Lewis. You'd love him. He's stubborn like you. And he believes in me the way you always did." She placed the peonies, always peonies, in the vase by the headstone. I'm happy, Mom. Really, truly happy. I have work I love. A husband who adores me. A brother who actually calls me now. She glanced at Thomas, who smiled. I'm not invisible anymore. I'm seen. I'm valued. I'm exactly who you always told me I could be. She's proud of you, Thomas said quietly. I know she is. I hope so. I know so. Because I'm proud of you, and I'm just your brother. Imagine how proud Mom must be. They stood there together, brother and sister, in front of their mother's grave, and Margaret felt complete in a way she'd never felt before. Like all the broken pieces had finally come together. At work on Monday, Margaret got a call from Camille. We have a situation. New hire in development is crying in the bathroom. Says her team lead is taking credit for her code. Margaret was already standing, grabbing her jacket. Conference room 3. 15 minutes. Get the team lead, the department head, and HR on it. By the end of the day, the team lead had been demoted, the new hire had been reassigned to Margaret's team, and word had spread throughout the company. Margaret Gray did not tolerate workplace theft. Ever. You're becoming the champion of the overlooked, Lewis said that night, amused and proud. People are calling you the defender of the invisible. Good. Someone needs to be. Just don't burn yourself out fighting everyone's battles. I'm not fighting everyone's battles. I'm changing the system so people don't have to fight these battles at all. Lewis pulled her onto the couch, into his arms. Have I mentioned lately that I'm in awe of you? Not in the last hour. Consider yourself informed. I'm in awe of you, Margaret Gray. Every single day. 6 months later, Margaret launched a company-wide initiative, the Recognition Program. Every employee could submit their work directly to a review board, anonymously, if they wanted. Projects were evaluated on merit, not on who submitted them. Credit was given where credit was due. The program was a massive success. Employee satisfaction skyrocketed. Innovation increased. And most importantly, people stopped being invisible. You've revolutionized how we operate, the chairman of the board told Margaret during a review meeting. Employee retention is up 30%. Innovation is up 40%. And it's all because people finally feel valued. That was always the goal, Margaret said. Talent is everywhere. Recognition isn't. We fixed that. That evening, Margaret came home to find Lewis in the kitchen, cooking dinner, a tradition they'd maintained despite their impossible schedules. Big day? He asked, kissing her hello. The recognition program stats came in. It's working better than we hoped. Of course it is. You designed it. Margaret wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. Can you believe it's been almost 2 years since you found me working late that Friday night? Best Friday night of my life. Mine too. You changed everything, Lewis. He turned in her arms, his expression serious. We changed each other. You made me remember there's more to life than work. You made me want to go home at the end of the day. You made me believe in love and partnership and building a life, not just a company. So we saved each other. We did. And we're going to keep saving each other. Every day. For the rest of our lives. They stood in their kitchen, holding each other, and Margaret thought about the journey that had brought her here. From invisible to visible. From overlooked to valued. From alone to loved. She thought about the scared woman she'd been, letting people walk all over her because she didn't believe she deserved better. And she thought about the woman she'd become, confident, powerful, willing to fight for herself and others. I love you, she whispered against Lewis's chest. I love you too. Forever and always. Later that night, Margaret sat at her desk in their home office, writing. She'd been approached by a publisher about telling her story, how she'd gone from overlooked employee to chief innovation officer. How she'd transformed a company's culture. How she'd found love and purpose and herself. She titled the first chapter, The Art of Being Invisible. And she wrote about the woman who'd perfected that art, who'd learned to disappear, who'd forgotten how to be seen. And then she wrote about the moment everything changed. About a CEO who saw potential where others saw nothing. About finding courage she didn't know she had. About becoming visible again. The book would take a year to write. It would become a bestseller. It would inspire thousands of people to stand up for themselves, to demand recognition, to refuse to be invisible. But that night, Margaret was just writing her story, telling her truth, sharing her journey from invisible to unstoppable. Louis appeared in the doorway with tea. He'd learned how she liked it, perfect temperature, just enough honey. Writing? He asked. Remembering. How far I've come. How different everything is. Any regrets? Margaret thought about Veronica, about the 2 years of being overlooked, about all the time she'd stayed silent when she should have spoken up. No, she said finally. Not even the hard parts. Because they led me here. To you. To us. To this life we've built. Louis kissed the top of her head. Then it was all worth it. Every single moment. She looked at her computer screen, at the words filling the page, at her story taking shape. And she thought about every person out there who felt invisible. Who let people take credit for their work. Who stayed silent because they were scared. And she wrote for them. For the woman she'd been. For the people who needed to hear that they deserved more. For everyone who'd ever felt like they didn't matter. Margaret Gray, once invisible, now unstoppable, typed the final words of her first chapter. You are not invisible. You never were. Some of us have been seeing you all along. And it's time for everyone else to see you too. She saved the document, closed her laptop, and went to find her husband. Because this was her life now. Recognition and love and purpose. Visibility and value and joy. And it was everything she'd never let herself hope for, but absolutely everything she deserved. Drop a comment if this story inspired you. And if you've ever felt invisible, remember, you deserve to be seen. You deserve recognition. You deserve everything Margaret fought for. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Red Heart.